Hello and welcome to the Indiana Lawyer Podcast, sponsored by Taft. I'm here today at the Dentons Legislative Conference and here with Dentons Senior Director of Public Policy, Brooke Burtnett. And so, we're just going to talk about, some of the takeaways with the conference today and some of the key points that were discussed as well. So I sat in the panel that you moderated this morning with the legislative leaders. How was that for you, and what were your takeaways in that?
I thought the panel went great today. We heard from all four legislative leaders on the priorities for their caucus for 2025. There was robust discussion, and even on medical marijuana, there was great debate, and there was a lot of discussion on Medicaid and how the state needs to address these issues.
And one of the big things definitely was the budget for this year, and that's obviously going to be a huge topic this legislative session, putting together that 2-year budget. What are some of the things that you are expecting to see in that budget? Obviously, like you said, Medicaid was a huge thing that was talked about. I think education was one of them as well.
What I expect is that the legislative leaders will really look at all facets of the budget, and they realize that if they address one, it will impact other sides of the budget. So I expect them to look at all sides of the budget and weigh their options on how they should best address it.
Besides the budget and that stuff, what are some of the other takeaways that you are, having from the sessions today? You said that you were kind of bouncing around a little bit in the sessions and the breakouts. What are you kind of looking at for this 2025 in January next month?
I expect a lot of debate on issues such as road funding, energy policy, healthcare reform, and heavy focus on Medicaid and how best to address the growing cost of Medicaid for the state.
And I didn't stay for this, but I'm sure you did. I saw Governor-elect Mike Braun and his fireside chat. How was that for you, getting to hear, what he talked about? What were some of the things that he talked about?
I thought it went great hearing from Governor-elect Braun. He was able to discuss some of his agenda items for 2025, including property taxes. He discussed his background as a business owner and how that will help influence the decisions he makes as he becomes the governor.
So was there anything that was surprising for you in the conversations that were had today in this conference?
Well, the revenue forecast came out yesterday, and so we had the perfect timing. I was a moderator for the fiscal panel, so I was able to ask the legislators their takeaway from the revenue forecast. And everyone has expected this budget to be very tight and that the revenue forecast would be very low. And they actually all were cautiously optimistic and pleasantly surprised. I mean, in no way is it numbers that we've had in the past, but everyone on the panel seems to think that at least for this revenue forecast, things are looking a tiny bit better than they anticipated. So that was a great takeaway.
Is there anything else that you kind of want to discuss about the conference that I didn't think to ask you?
We host this conference every year right before the next legislative session. We will be here again next December, and we hope you can join us.
Taft, today's modern law firm. At Taft, we cultivate a highly respectful, transparent workplace that fosters creativity, teamwork, inclusion, and diversity. We couple our culture with a client-first approach, rewarding lawyers who understand their clients' goals and work to deliver success. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
Welcome back. Managing Editor Daniel Carson and reporter Maura Johnson and I are here in our Monument Circle studio to give you the rundown on the latest legal news. So let's get started. Today's Thursday, December 26, 2024. Happy holidays. Maura, kick us off on our headlines. You have news about a long legal battle with the state's former attorney general. What can you tell us?
Former Indiana Attorney General Curtis Hill won't face a civil trial in a lawsuit that accused him of groping 4 women at a party in 2018. Former state representative Maura Candelaria Reardon and former state legislative staffers Gabrielle McLemore Brock, Samantha Lozano, and Nikki Da Silva dropped their lawsuit on December 8th, canceling a trial that was set to begin the following day. In a statement, the women told Indy Star that they dropped the case after reaching, quote, the frustrating conclusion that proceeding with the trial cannot provide the relief they sought, namely Mr. Hill accepting responsibility for his actions and admitting his fault and intentionally touching each of them in a sexual manner without consent, end quote. Dismissal of the case appears to end more than 6 years of legal entanglements Hill has faced since the women accused him of inappropriately touching them at a party to celebrate the end of the state legislative session in March 2018. Hill has consistently denied the allegations. In a statement released to the Indiana Lawyer, Hill pointed to dismissal of the case as evidence that justice prevails. Hill said, quote, there was no financial settlement, there were no conditions for dismissal, the case against me was dismissed with prejudice by each of the plaintiffs, thus ending this odyssey of unfounded allegations that have dogged me for nearly 7 years and have served as the fuel for political and personal attacks against me, end quote. Initially, a special prosecutor was assigned to the case and chose not to bring criminal charges, but the Indiana Supreme Court considered a disciplinary commission complaint against Hill in 2020 and found that he had committed battery. The Supreme Court suspended his law license for 30 days. Hill went on to lose his re-election bid as Attorney General that year by failing to win the Republican nomination. In an attempted political comeback, he also sought the Republican nomination for governor this year, but placed last among 6 candidates. The women told Indy Star they were willing to resolve the case without any monetary compensation if Hill apologized and accept responsibility, but he refused.
Thanks, Maura. Convicted murderer Joseph Corcoran was pronounced dead by lethal injection at 12:44 a.m. on December 18th, making the first Indiana execution since 2009. Corcoran had been on death row since 1999, was 22 when he killed his brother James Corcoran, 30, Robert Turner, 32, Douglas Stowell, 30, and Timothy Bricker, 30, on July 26, 1997. He committed the murders at the home he shared with his brother and sister. The Indiana Supreme Court upheld the death sentence earlier this month, just as multiple state and federal courts had done. Appeals for post-conviction relief at the federal level were unsuccessful too. Late Tuesday night, the U.S. Supreme Court also denied a last-ditch request for relief filed by the federal defense attorney Larry Comp. That meant final intervention was left to Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb, who ultimately rejected calls for a pardon. Death row inmate Benjamin Ritchie may be the next prisoner to be executed by the state of Indiana. The Office of the Attorney General requested an execution date be set for Ritchie in September. Ritchie requested permission to file a successive petition for post-conviction relief. Now, going back to Maura, what can you tell us about a wrongful death lawsuit?
The parents of a 10-year-old 4th grade student who died by suicide in May are suing the Greenfield Central Community School Corporation for wrongful death, alleging the school failed to protect their son from bullying. The wrongful death lawsuit, filed on December 17th in the Hancock County Circuit Court, recounts the abuse, assault, and terror Sammy Touche reportedly went through at the hands of school bullies and the callous indifference exhibited by defendants who were repeatedly informed of the situation, according to court documents. Brian Grossman, co-counsel for the Touche family, said in a news release, quote, the suit is about more than holding the Greenfield School Corporation accountable. It's about making sure no child ever experiences what Sammy experienced, and no family again experiences the heartbreak the Touche family can now never escape, end quote. The suit claims that the defendants were reportedly told about the bullying but did nothing to address it. Greenfield Central Superintendent Harold Olin did not respond to Indiana lawyers' requests for comment. The plaintiffs said their son's complaints to his teacher, which included acting out to get her attention, would only result in the teacher disciplining him for what she saw as disruptive behavior. The 4th grade student faced months of abuse from a group of classmates who reportedly choked him until he saw stars and made fun of his teeth and glasses, according to the lawsuit. The filing described one instance where a student allegedly hit Touche so hard in the head with an iPad that it broke his glasses and gave him a black eye. Approximately 20 reports were made in person and over the phone by Touche's parents to their son's teachers, principal, and counselor asking for Sammy's protection and safety, the lawsuit stated. The couple said the boy moved to the Greenfield School District in November 2022 and that he'd never had problems with bullies at his previous schools. Sam Touche, Sammy's father, said Sammy was, quote, smart, funny, quick to make friends, knew no strangers, meant no harm to anyone, and had the biggest heart along with the best smile. And it seems that made him an easy target and easy for school officials to dismiss and disregard him. And we can't let the world be like that, end quote. In addition to a wrongful death accusation, the plaintiffs are also suing the defendants for negligent care and supervision. The plaintiffs have requested a jury trial.
Thanks, Maura. Moving to Daniel, what can you tell us about a recent murder conviction in Delaware County?
A Muncie man faces up to 85 years in prison after he was convicted in the 2023 murder of his ex-wife. A Delaware County jury deliberated for approximately 5 hours before convicting Caesar Curtis, 51, of murder. After the verdict was returned, Curtis acknowledged that he is an habitual offender and had 2 prior felony convictions for arson and operating a vehicle while intoxicated. Delaware Circuit Court Judge John Fike set sentencing for January 8th at 9 a.m. Murder is punishable by 45 to 65 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine. That sentence can be enhanced by an additional 6 to 20 years due to Curtis' status as a habitual offender. The Star Press in Muncie reported Curtis was accused of fatally beating 46-year-old Marcia Curtis, who had divorced him a few months before her death. According to a probable cause affidavit, Curtis was arrested in September 2023. Investigators spoke to a witness that informed police Curtis told him that he, quote, did it, end quote. Curtis allegedly told the witness he hit his ex-wife with a baseball bat and left her near a reservoir. The witness led police to a site on 13800 East County Road South. Police discovered Marcia Curtis' body there with significant head trauma.
Thanks, Daniel. Purdue University's chief legal officer was arrested on December 11th for allegedly operating a vehicle while intoxicated, according to Tippecanoe County jail logs. Stephen Schultz was booked at 5:12 a.m. on a preliminary charge of operating a vehicle with an alcohol concentration equivalent of 0.15 or more. Under Indiana law, 0.08 is considered intoxicated. Schultz could not immediately be reached for comment. He is scheduled to appear in Tippecanoe Superior Court on February 3rd at 8:30 a.m. Purdue University stated to Indiana Lawyer that it would address the matter and the Board of Trustees are aware of the charges. Netflix came out on the losing end of a case where a woman claimed the network invaded her privacy in its documentary Our Father. Maura, what can you tell us about that?
A child of Zionsville fertility doctor Donald Klein has prevailed in a lawsuit against Netflix and an associated production company after defendants used her name in a Netflix documentary without her consent. A federal jury in Indianapolis decided the company should pay $385,000 to the woman as compensation for invasion of privacy by disclosure of a private fact. The verdict settles a more than 2-year battle with the streaming service over its documentary, Our Father. The documentary recounts the discovery of dozens of half-siblings who all share the same father, fertility specialist Klein, who inseminated several of his patients with his own semen without their knowing. Through his fertility fraud, Klein fathered at least 94 children, according to the lawsuit. The jury didn't award any damages to another plaintiff. The claims of a third woman were dismissed before the trial. In May and June 2022, the 3 plaintiffs filed separate state court actions against Netflix LLC, Netflix Worldwide Entertainment LLC, and Real House Productions LLC. Those lawsuits were moved to federal court, where they were consolidated. In 2017, Klein was criminally charged with obstruction of justice and handed a 1-year suspended sentence after pleading guilty to charges that he lied to investigators when he denied wrongdoing for inseminating the women. After his expired license was eventually surrendered to the Indiana Medical Licensing Board, the panel voted to bar Klein from ever applying for a license in Indiana again.
Thanks, Maura. The Indiana Supreme Court has denied to hear a case in which a man's car was searched without a warrant based on the smell of burnt marijuana in his vehicle. On appeal, Breon Jackson challenged the denial of his motion to suppress evidence of a handgun found in his car during the search that resulted in him being charged with 1-count level 4 felony unlawful possession of a firearm by a serious violent felon. The Indiana Court of Appeals affirmed Hamilton Superior Court Judge William Hughes' denial of Jackson's motion to suppress in October 2023 memorandum opinion. The Supreme Court decided 3-2 not to hear Jackson's appeal. Justices Mark Massa, Jeffrey Slaughter, and Christopher Goff voted with the majority. Chief Justice Loretta Rush dissented with a separate opinion which Derek Moulter joined. Quote, "The court's decision today avoids addressing this important issue, leaves standing an opinion that misstates the record and fails to protect one of our citizens' constitutional rights," Rush wrote in her dissent. Jackson's attorney, Denise Turner, called the denial disappointing. And finally, to wrap up this week's headlines, Daniel, tell us about what our next print edition will feature.
For our first issue of 2025, Indiana Lawyer will spotlight the top 10 stories of the past year. We'll put a spotlight on some of the most impactful stories of 2024. You can read all about it in our January 1st print edition.
Okay, that'll do for this week's headlines. As always, if you want more legal news, check us out at theindianalawyer.com.